Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the digital studio of the first edition of our Innovation Island Summit 2025 here in Colombo. I'm Swati Prabhu, and I work for the Observer Research Foundation. And today I'm joined by two brilliant experts, Dr. Davung Jung. She is a lecturer at the Australian National Centre for Ocean Resources and Security, University of Wollongong, Australia, and Romesh David, Chief Executive Officer, South Asia Gateway Terminals here at Sri Lanka. Thank you for joining us today. And the conversation today will revolve around how we can build bridges as far as enhancing maritime connectivity and development is concerned. Dr. Jung, if I can come to you first. We understand, we've been discussing technology in and out throughout the summit, the rise of technology and how it has been changing the business landscape across industries, across nations. Also, we realize that, advances in technology are in a way, encouraging trends that if some nations don't reach that level, they might not stay relevant anymore. Companies in maritime industries are grappling to adapt to these new technologies, and they don't want to be left behind in this rat race. So in this sense, technology in maritime sector like satellites, ICT, artificial intelligence, everyone is taking this big leap of faith in innovation, and this summit is all about innovating. On top of it, we have the added climate stress. In your view, how do you look at this entire conversation or the narrative or the debate on regulating the impacts of climate change related technologies on the marine environment, since you specialize on marine environment, to ensure and also to look forward to a sustainable future? Over to you, Dr.
Thank you for your question, Swati. Yes, as you said, that there are huge developments in the shipping sector, such as the autonomous vessels, digital ports, and green fuels, etc. But for your question, I would like to introduce the new development at the International Maritime Organization, namely the IMO, the UN Specialized Agency for the Regulation of Shipping. IMO has engaged in the many global approach to enhance ships' energy efficiency and to reduce CO2 from the shipping. And there was a very, very important development in 2023. The IMO adopted the revised greenhouse gas strategy in 2023. This is a milestone because it sets the ambition to reach the net zero of the CO2 emission from shipping sector by 2050. And it includes the short and mid and then longer terms of the measures with the possible timelines and their impacts on the states. And in particular, it's very important because it includes the decreasing the carbon intensity of the international shipping, but also increasing the new technological development to reduce CO2 emissions and the use of the green fuels.
Okay, that's quite interesting. You bring a international perspective on the table as far as carbon footprints or the entire debate we are having on net zero, particularly talking of the shipping industry. Now, Romesh David, you come from Sri Lanka and you come from the infrastructure sector, hardcore, have been in the industry for a number of years. I want to understand your take on technology, particularly with the context of rise of smart ports, innovative green shipping technologies, and also the maritime sector right there is at the forefront when we talk about fighting against climate stress. And it is also pushing for cleaner fuels, best practices as far as sustainability is concerned. So what is your take when we look at reshaping of the future of maritime connectivity here, technology? Over to you.
Thank you, Swati, and thank you for having me. I think as Dr. Jones said, we, Sri Lanka, are signatories to the IMO convention. So therefore, we are obligated to meet these same targets. And so there is a 2030 goal, a 2040 goal, and a 2050 ambition, obviously. Now, as part of as a signatory and as part of the maritime supply chain, I think there are two key areas where the whole issue of decarbonization and using technology for it apply. Firstly, there is directly in terms of fuels, where the technology and the applications relative to ships and everything. And then there's another whole raft of stuff to do with the infrastructure, which is the land side support. So Sri Lanka, where, if you take the ports of Sri Lanka, which is really the hub of the maritime infrastructure for Colombo and for Sri Lanka, we have a fairly steep hill to climb. Having said that, we also have the advantage of being able to, technology is moving so fast, so that we have the advantage of being able to leapfrog from where we are today, which is high intensity diesel related, fossil fuel related ecosystem in the port to a fairly green ecosystem in a much shorter period of time. Obviously, there's capex involved, but certainly in terms of emissions. So the move from internal combustion engines to hybrid to green technology, the move to electrification. There's a huge, and that requires its own set of challenges and capex. And then beyond that, in electrification itself, Sri Lanka's grid is possibly 30 to 35% green, renewable. So there's a 65% portion that is emission-based, it's carbon-based. But Sri Lanka, because of the large pool of untapped resources in terms of renewable energy, has an opportunity to leapfrog. With the reforms in the Electricity Act, the port is a fantastic ecosystem where you can actually green all the energy very quickly by supplying green energy to the port. So that will help in terms of the maritime infrastructure. It will help in terms of providing green power to ships, electrification on the port, and more so creating an ecosystem that will lend itself to manufacture of green fuel, which is a huge economic potential for Sri Lanka, where with the excess renewable, you're looking at fuels like green hydrogen, green methanol, green ammonia, and these are the fuels of the future and really the technologies of the future that we can leverage on.
So you gave us an idea or gave us a picture of the positive aspects of how the maritime industry can contribute towards sustainability. But let's come to the challenges a bit. We see that although maritime connectivity is the lifeline of global trade, almost 90% of global trade traverses through the sea lanes. But there are challenges as well, and not just climate, but also regulatory challenges as far as checks and balances, mechanisms in place, and pushing for sustainable practices. Dr. Jung, if I can come to you, how do you perceive this particular aspect in the context of the current geopolitical scenario, the urgent need, in fact, for rule of law, and also the geo-economic imperatives that we are placed, in the current scenario? Over to you.
I was talking about the IMO's efforts to reduce the CO2 from the shipping sector. But the strategy clearly acknowledges that the small island developing states may face challenges in the implementation of the strategy. So with the ongoing effort to reduce CO2 from the shipping sector, the IMO provides the technical cooperation and capacity building programs. So I will give you two examples. First, IMO strategy addressed that the IMO should periodically assess the financial status through the voluntary multi-donor trust fund established by the IMO for assisting the developing states. And this is a very important fund for the developing island states because they may not have enough funding to implement the strategy. And second, the IMO provides different kinds of capacity building program. For example, the Green Voyage 2050 program provides technical cooperation to implement the 2023 strategy. And selected states received the support to develop their national action plans to reduce CO2 from their own shipping sector and to implement the strategy. None of the developing island states were included in this pilot project, but I believe that it's very important to expand these kinds of capacity building programs to developing island states, which are tailored to their special characteristics and the needs of the demands.
You very importantly touched upon the financing bottlenecks we face as far as meeting the sustainable development goals, technical cooperation, capacity buildings. So coming to that, and also SID, small island economies, how they are, right there at the forefront of the climate stress, but they don't have the means to fight that stress. Romesh, David, if I can come to you, you come from a small island economy, you see, Sri Lanka. There is this need for critical infrastructure to deal with disasters, to deal with sustainability. How do you view that in terms of Agenda 2030? We are sitting right at, the deadline is fast approaching. And there is this entire, everybody is discussing about new connectivity agendas, new connectivity projects. So how do you see this demand for critical infrastructure, and how can we fill the gap? I'll go a step further and maybe ask you, what are the financing avenues as far as Sri Lanka is concerned?
Thank you, Swati. So I think, one thing, as a small island economy, island or otherwise, Sri Lanka punches considerably above its weight in terms of our maritime, the role we play in terms of a maritime hub and a port, particularly. Port of Colombo, we are possibly around the 100th economy in terms of size, but the port is, we are number 22 in terms of volume. We are number 10 or 11 in terms of global connectivity from a port perspective. Every major shipping line passes through, and with almost 8 million TEUs going through the Port of Colombo, we function as a major transshipment hub here. So in that sense, there has been no paucity of capital or interest for maritime infrastructure development around the port. And this includes terminals, this includes other, ancillary services. Plus, Sri Lanka has a few other advantages going for it. One is we're at the doorstep of India. And I think our economies are inextricably linked. And India has a very clear agenda, both in terms of its sustainability and its green ambitions, and in terms of its maritime aspirations, which have now become, a little more manifest in recent past. So I think Colombo and Sri Lanka itself have these two, wagons, stars that can be hitched. And there is also a sort of a greater opportunity, which is the potential, because of our proximity again, the ability to enhance this maritime connectivity with actual land connectivity. It's a 22-mile or a 30-kilometer bridge, which is nothing really. And then when you augment the maritime linkages with road and rail, energy and infrastructure, other related connectivity, then it takes on a whole different dimension. You're not necessarily limited to be looking through the lens of a small island economy anymore. So I think therein lies the advantage, both in terms of opportunity. So the opportunity to leapfrog, as I said earlier, the technology opportunity in terms of our bank of untapped renewable potential, and the fact that we then sit on the doorstep of the world's next major economy. They are already there. But so I think these happy or serendipitous factors provide a great deal of opportunity, which unfortunately Sri Lanka has not been very good at making use of in the recent past. So the opportunity is there. Converting that to reality, I think, is something that we have to have internal resolve, because there is no shortage of capital, no shortage of technology, and no shortage of willingness, I think, both from the region and even further afield.
So it's just tapping the right potential at the right time.
And getting our own acts together.
Yeah.
I think,
So in that sense, I think the role of international organizations also come into the picture. Multilaterals, regional frameworks, and cooperative structures that have been created over over a few years. In that sense, Dr. Jung, if I can come to you, how do you perceive the role of multilaterals, also private stakeholders, as far as ensuring support for long-term maritime infrastructure projects are concerned, not just Sri Lanka, but also taking an international perspective to it?
So as Swati mentioned, that cooperation and coordination with all stakeholders, including states, international and regional organizations, private sectors, is essential to maintain the sustainable maritime transportation and maritime connectivity. And I want to give the example of the cooperation and coordination in the context of the development of the port infrastructure. Because for small island developing states with limited resources, having effective port infrastructure is very important. And having the effective port infrastructure makes them their business open easily. and then make them more attractive to other countries. And with the new technological developments of the digital ports and the impact of climate change, it is very important to think about how to establish the digital ports and climate resilient port. And first, as for the digital port, it is designed to make the efficient process with the automated system. And recently, UN Trade and Development offer Maldives a program on the port automation and digitalization. And as we can see from this pilot project, it's very important to establish the digital port infrastructure. And it is also important to get the technical cooperation to develop the relevant digital systems, but also provides the comprehensive the training for the marine personnel who may not be familiar with this kind of digital system. And I believe that in this context, international or regional organization can play a role in the developing this kind of new system for the island countries. And second, port infrastructure become very vulnerable due to the increasing intensity and frequency of the maritime disasters caused by climate change. And in particular, the small island developing states have much more impact from this climate change and the maritime disasters. So it's very important to establish climate resilient port infrastructure in cooperation with the private sector.
So we see that there's a lot of potential, but sitting in Sri Lanka, Romesh David, how do you look at it? Cooperation from the multilateral, since multilateralism is in a state of flux. Everybody knows that. How do you look at this?
So, Swati, historically, Sri Lanka has been amongst the favored few again, because if you take my own company that I work for as an example, it really was a perfect example of coming together of multilaterals, private investment, and government. 25 years ago, we had investors, marquee investors like the IFC, which is part of the World Bank, the ADB, the Commonwealth Development Corporation, the government of Sri Lanka, the P&O Group, and the John Keel's Group. So when you look at it, really the type of real poster child mix of how multilaterals, government, and private sector can work together with industry and real benefit to the local economy. Now, it doesn't always happen like that. And I think, if not for that, Sri Lanka would not have been in the position it is with respect to our participation in the maritime industry. So it is possible. And there are examples of it, of where it has come together. And if you look at the multilaterals, whilst obviously there are new challenges now facing multilateralism, we also have, again, the advantage of great bilateral support. So if you take economies like India, like Japan, like the Quad, there have been Sri Lanka, again, because of its sort of fortuitous location also, has these opportunities that we can make use of. Again, the limitations are purely internal. I think we need a more educated polity. We need a more educated citizenry in terms of making use of this opportunity.
I think we did touch upon a number of ideas in this session today, and I would have continued this, but this marks the end of our conversation. Thank you both for joining us today, and thanks for tuning in.
Thank you. Thank you.